बिस्मिल्लाहिर्रहमानिर्रहीम। मेरा नाम है आसिम मुख्तार। आप देख रहे हैं वॉइस ऑफ पांस। हमारे साथ आज के जो मेहमान हैं उनका नाम माइकल वुड है। उनका तारुफ भी हम कराएंगे थोड़ी देर में। और मेरी आज की जो को होस्ट हैं आयशा कोसर, उन्होंने भी हमें ज्वाइन कर लिया हुआ है। मैं आयशा कोसर से कहूँगा कि स्क्रीन के ऊपर मैं उनको मदऊ करूँगा। अस्सलाम वालेकुम आयशा, कैसी हैं आप?
वालेकुम अस्सलाम एंड अस्सलाम वालेकुम टू आवर कम्युनिटी मेंबर्स। मैं हूँ आयशा, आपकी होस्ट वॉइस ऑफ पैंस के प्लेटफॉर्म से, और उम्मीद करती हूँ कि आप सब खैरियत से होंगे।
बेहतरीन बेहतरीन, बहुत ही अच्छा मौसम था कल, और आज उतनी ही बारिश होती रही। और लेकिन ये कि मैं एक दफ़ा पूछता चलूँ, कुछ लोग हमें देख रहे हैं, अगर उनको हमारी आवाज़ और तस्वीर साफ आ रही है तो काइंडली एक मैसेज कर दीजिएगा। मैसेज करने से एक चीज़ ये भी फ़ायदा होता है कि जैसे ही आप मैसेज करते हैं तो ट्रिगर जो फेसबुक का जो एल्गोरिदम है वो भी ट्रिगर करता है कि लोग जो हैं उनको हेल्प करता है लाइव करने में। सो तानिया हैज सेड दैट नीड सबटाइटल्स ऑन। तानिया, I'm really sorry. I don't know how to turn it on. I'll ask my colleague how to turn it on. So we'll definitely, Arshad bhai, if you are watching us, let me know, because I saw somebody have turned these uh, subtitles on. आयशा, आपका कल का दिन और आज का दिन कैसा रहा? कैसा चल रहा है आपका वीकेंड?
अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह काफी अच्छा रहा, मौसम बहुत अच्छा था कल। और कल एक खास बात ये थी कि सुपर सैटरडे था, जिसमें वैक्सीनेशन जो थी वो पूरे जोरों शोर से जो हुई कल। और बाकी सारा दिन मैं बीच पे थी ऑनेस्टली। हम जो है वो सनी डे था, उसको एंजॉय कर रहे थे, बच्चे एंजॉय कर रहे थे। और ये लास्ट वीकेंड था हमारा स्कूल हॉलीडेज का, तो कल
बिल्कुल
से
ऐसा
जो
ही
है
है।
वो स्कूल ऑन है।
So
हाँ
okay,
जी।
so the schools are लोग बच्चों के स्कूल दोबारा से खुल रहे हैं, the kids are going to school है।
हाँ जी।
ये तो बड़ी
हाँ
खुशी
जी।
की बात है, क्योंकि 2 महीने हो गए बच्चों ने घरों के ऊपर जो है खूब उधम मचाया हुआ है।
हाँ जी, लेकिन बच्चे हमारे ऑकलैंड के बच्चे तो घर ही हैं। बाकी सबके स्कूल्स जो हैं वो खुल जाएंगे, आउट ऑफ ऑकलैंड जो हैं।
तो इसका मतलब है कि हम लेवल 2 के अंदर जा रहे हैं शायद।
शायद मुझे तो नहीं लगता, आपको लगता है? आई डोंट थिंक सो कि हम जाएंगे, क्योंकि अभी तो केसेस जो है वो काफी ज्यादा है। लेकिन देखें कि कल एक अच्छी बात ये थी कि उन्होंने कहा कि हमारा जितना भी इंक्रीज हो सकता है वैक्सीनेशन रेट 90% होगा, तो हमारी जो है वो आहिस्ता आहिस्ता जो भी पब्लिक सेंटर्स हैं, जो जूस वगैरह हैं, म्यूजियम्स हैं, और आहिस्ता आहिस्ता स्कूल्स भी जो है वो ओपन हो जाएंगे। तो लेट्स सी कि गवर्नमेंट क्या हमारे पास अनाउंसमेंट लेकर आती है। कल कल जो था वो मैं कल की बात कर रही हूँ, जो सैटरडे गुजरा है, उसमें हमारे पास ये सबसे अच्छी बात थी कि पैंस ने जो है वो ओटाहू लाइफ लाइन के साथ मिलके एक वैक्साथॉन जो है वो अरेंज करवाया हुआ था। और ये हुआ था कि उन्होंने हमारे पास फूड पैक्स जो थे पैंस वालों ने वो दिए, और फूड पार्सल्स थे वो दिए, और बड़ा एक अच्छा एटमॉस्फेयर उधर रहा। आसिम भाई, आप उधर थे मौजूद? मैं
जी,
उधर
मैं
नहीं जा
बिल्कुल
सकी।
था। एंड मैं तो बताता चलूं कि मुझे तो ऐसे लगा जैसे मैं किसी मेले के ऊपर आ गया हूँ। बिल्कुल फेस्टिवल का माहौल जो है वो पाकिस्तान एसोसिएशन ऑफ न्यूजीलैंड ने बनाया हुआ था। एंड द पीपल वर कमिंग। उसके अलावा लोग आ रहे थे, अपनी वैक्सीनेशन लगवा रहे थे। उसके बाद उनको वाउचर्स दिए जा रहे थे, जिसके अंदर उनको 3-4 चीजें मिल रही थी। नंबर 1, दे वर गेटिंग बरिस्टा कॉफी फॉर फ्री। देन दे गेट बिरयानी फ्री। एंड देन दे गेट ग्रोसरी का एक बैग था जिसके अंदर बहुत सारी चीजें, दूध और अंडे और बहुत सारी चीजें थी, वो मिल रही थी। और उसके अलावा कोई, मेरा ख्याल है, कुरानंदाजी भी की जा रही थी कि जिसके ऊपर कोई गिफ्ट दिया जाना है। तो मैं आपको बताता चलूं, कल मैंने अपने बेटे को भी लगवाई है वैक्सीनेशन, और उसने इसी खुशी में लगवाई कि उसको कॉफी भी मिली, उसको खाने को लंच भी मिला साथ। वो अपना, मैंने उसको बोला भी कि यार ये बैग ना लेके आ, कहते नहीं मुझे मेरा है, मैं घर लेके जाऊंगा, एंड आई विल मेक पास्ता। और फिर वो जब घर आया तो उसने वो जो पास्ता उस बैग में से निकला तो वो भी बनाया। और बड़ी अच्छी बात यह है कि तकरीबन 200 लोगों ने कल वैक्सीनेशन कराई है, जिसमें तकरीब पाकिस्तानियों की तादाद कोई अप्रोक्सीमेटली 75 के करीब पाकिस्तानियों की तादाद थी। और 125 लोग जो थे वो दूसरी कम्युनिटीज थे, जिसमें से टोंगन, सामोअन and the other people who have actually got vaccinated. While we are talking about the vaccination, I'll let you know that Michael Wood has joined us. So I'll invite Michael Wood, and I'll ask Aisha to introduce her before inviting him onto the screen. Yes, Aisha.
So today's guest we have is the MP Michael Wood, and Michael Wood is the MP for Mount Roskill, Minister of Transport and Minister of Workplace Relations and Safety, and he's also the Deputy Leader of the House. And talking about Michael, he's closely connected with New Zealand's vibrant and growing ethnic communities and is focused on ensuring that every person, regardless of background, has the ability to flourish and reach their fullest potential in New Zealand. So, welcome, Michael, to our show. We are very happy to have you over here.
Thank you, Aisha. Really nice to be with you and Asim tonight.
Thank you very much, Michael. We'll start obviously from yesterday's big story of Vexathon. What a wonderful festival! It was such a great event yesterday. It was like a festival within the country. So tell us, how do you see yesterday's Vexathon? Do you think the government has achieved these numbers? And the last question: have we left it too late?
Yesterday, Super Saturday, was a really outstanding success. We had over 130,000 New Zealanders get their vaccination. In Auckland, that means that we are now up to 89% of eligible people having had their first vaccination. And it was one of the highest per capita days that any country in the world has ever had for vaccinations.
Yeah.
Look, the number one thing we can do as a country is to get our vaccination rate up as high as possible. That's how we help people keep safe. That's how we reduce the need for lockdowns, and it's how we get back to the things that we love. So I think it was a tremendously successful day. And I just want to thank everyone, the people who did the vaccinating, the volunteers, all of those people who turned up, rolled up their sleeves and did their thing for New Zealand. I think it was great, but we've just got to keep on going now. We can't leave it at Saturday. The higher we get the rate up, the safer we are, the better for everyone in New Zealand.
Agree. And just to update you that Pakistan Association of New Zealand has also arranged a camp in Otahuhu, and the numbers were very encouraging. We have had around 200 people got vaccinated. 75 were Pakistanis, and there's approximately 40% the new vaxxers. So the people who have got the first vaccination. And it was all like festival. There was food, there was coffee, there was people were dancing and all that. So it looks absolutely very good. And thank you very much for thinking out of the box and bringing this festival. Are you guys going to do another Super Saturday or Super Sunday next week? Because it has encouraged a lot of people to get vaccination.
I think people really like that sort of festival idea, and the idea of turning it into something fun that the whole community could mobilize around, and just thanking and acknowledging PANZ for the way that you participated in that. At this stage, we don't have a specific plan for next week, but we'll keep an open mind about it. We'll have cabinet meeting tomorrow, and I know that we'll be talking further about what our next steps can be to really get the vaccination rates up. So I certainly wouldn't rule that out.
Thank you very much. Yes,
thank you. Thank you, Michael. So I would just like to know that what is the effect of COVID-19 lockdown on the transport sector, because that is in your portfolio. So we'd like to, shed some light on that aspect, and how the transport system is going to alter itself when, the alert levels are going to go down, especially in Auckland for a safer community. Yeah.
Thanks, Aisha. Well, look, COVID has affected every single sector and every part of life in New Zealand, and it's the same in the transport sector. So it's had a major effect, for example, on how we move forward with some of our major projects. When we went into level 4, which was about 9 or 10 weeks ago now, work on virtually all of our major projects stopped. Even when we went down to level 3, and other parts of the country have gone down to level 2, that has meant that workforces haven't been available. So, for example, the main team of people doing pavement work on the Transmission Gully project in Wellington were actually based up in Auckland, and they were stuck here for a period. They're down there doing the job now. But so it's resulted in some delays to a number of projects. We've worked our way through most of those now, but it has added in some extra time, and in some cases, some extra cost to some of the big transport projects that we're undertaking. So that's been a bit frustrating, but obviously that's the nature of COVID. We just have to prioritise people's health first. It's had an impact in other areas as well. Very clearly, we've had an impact on public transport where the numbers using public transport have dropped because we haven't had so many people going to work. We've had to have distancing requirements and that kind of thing. So we've had to look at how we fund our public transport systems, for example. So really it is like every other part of New Zealand. There's been a definite impact from COVID, but everyone in the transport sector just works very, very hard to try and make sure that we get the job done as fast as we can to deliver good projects for New Zealand.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was a very detailed answer.
Yeah. While we have actually distributed the questions among me and Aisha will be asking you about your portfolio, and I'll be asking general questions about the government initiatives and all that. So the other question will be around immigration, and thank you very much for allowing 165,000 people to actually apply for one-off resident, and it was absolutely good news, and we have taken it very positively, and the communities are very happy, the community leaders are very happy. Just on that, we have been actually connected by the people who have been left out of this one-off resident visas, like the people who got stranded in our countries back home and they were traveling and the COVID-19 lockdown hits. The other are the PhD students who are obviously the innovators. The government is spending a lot of money on them because you know that the PhDs are subsidized by the government. So they are in their last years and they can actually bring a lot of innovation, a lot of product innovation, and a lot of research into this country. While we allow them to go and work for Australia, Canada, and all that, why can't we hold on to them? So these are the two people which are actually quite frustrated. One is the students who are in their last years, and obviously the stranded migrants. Is there anything you or your government in thinking about them?
Well, look, the announcements that were made by Minister Chris Farfoy the other week have been, I think, generally really well received.
It is.
And obviously, at a similar time, there have also been a range of clarifications around culturally arranged marriages. So I know that these have been two big issues that have been frustrating for a long time. So I think it's been good to make progress on them. The decision to allow pathway for residency for 165,000 people is the biggest move in this area for a long time. And I think for many of those people, they were people who had a very long-term commitment into New Zealand, and particularly having been here through the COVID period, I think that was a fair thing to do. But obviously, when it comes to residency, we do have to take decisions about where the line gets drawn, and ultimately, Cabinet and the Minister, Chris Farfoy, determined that limit of people who had been established here for at least 3 years on the whole was an appropriate way of, I guess, measuring a level of contribution to New Zealand and a level of being settled in the country in terms of opening up for residency. Obviously, too, most of those people are already employed. They're generally people who are on work visas. So in most cases, those people will have a confirmed ability to be able to sustain themselves and their families. So that's really why the line's been drawn where it has been drawn around that large group of people. But as Minister Farfoy said at the time, we will continue to look at the situation and review the situation, and we won't rule out further changes in the future.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you. That sounds very reassuring, Michael. Thank you for that answer. So just jumping back onto COVID-19 scenario. So how do you see New Zealand in a post-COVID scenario when it's over, hopefully?
Hopefully. Well, look, a couple of things there. It's a very big question, by the way.
Yeah.
I think the first thing to say is that the whole world is going to continue to be affected by COVID for quite a long time. We're not suddenly going to get to, the 1st of January 2022 and we'll flick a switch and it'll all be over, unfortunately. We're going to have a transition period where we move back to, I think, a country and a world that are more normal, but it'll never be quite the same way that it was beforehand, because this disease is here with us long term, but we've got more tools to manage it, particularly as we get those vaccination rates up high. But my real hope, if we're looking forward, is that we don't just go back to where we were. I think that would be a real lost opportunity. When you look back at world history, and I'm a student of history, it's often when you have times of real crisis and challenge in societies that you have the ability to make some changes to make things better. And that's what I hope that we do, actually. I hope that we address some of those long-term challenges that we face. And at the moment, for example, in New Zealand, we are dealing with the fact that we're struggling a little bit with some of our vaccination rates in some of our lower income, more disconnected communities. Well, that's a legacy of 30 or 40 years where parts of our community have got left behind, and now we're paying the price for that a bit. Let's do something about that and build a more inclusive and fairer society. We've shown through the course of COVID that when we really put our minds to it as a country, we can achieve incredible things. We can come together with a sense of shared purpose. Well, let's apply that to some of the other big challenges that we face, whether it's in housing, whether it's in climate change, whether it's in dealing with child poverty. So I hope that we can sort of harness that sense of social solidarity to be dealing with some of those really big issues that our country continues to face. And that's my hope as we move forward. But obviously all of that is underscored by an ongoing determination to make sure that we keep New Zealanders as safe and healthy as possible.
Great. My next question is connected to the same question, is that when the Prime Minister has given us the pathway to opening the borders previously, and there was certain things which needs to be done before opening the border. In general, when do you see that, what is the percentage what government think that if we achieve this kind of percentage in vaccination, we will be opening the borders?
Government ministers are currently working through these questions and working really closely with Dr. Bloomfield and our public health advisors at the moment to work out what the best way forward is. We know that as we move forward, we do want to reconnect with the world, but we need to make sure that we do that really, really safely, because the disease continues to be very, very dangerous, particularly to more vulnerable people. The Prime Minister will have more to say about this in the coming period. But broadly speaking, what she has already outlined is a 3-step process. The first step is about vaccination, and that's why this last week and Super Saturday have been so important. If we get that vaccination up to a very, very high level, and we've indicated that a figure of 90% is important, but the more we can push it up, the higher than that we can get, we continue to reduce the risk. Let's get those rates up as high as possible in all parts of our community. That's step one. Step two, which the Prime Minister has indicated, is beginning to shift towards a new framework. And that's about saying if we have those rates of vaccination up very, very high, we can start to manage COVID and Delta without having to do the lockdowns so much. We'll be able to use more refined techniques because with the high rates of vaccination, we don't have such a high rate of the disease spreading very quickly. So step one, vaccination. Step two, shifting to a new framework that's less reliant on lockdowns. Step three, once we've done those things, is then about how we can begin to carefully reconnect to the world. And so even though we've been dealing with Delta over the last couple of months, in the background, we've had a lot of work going on with officials, with the airline industry, for example, and other experts about how we can start to do that. You will have already started to have seen some of the work about vaccine passports being talked about. Well, that's a really important part of how we can start to open the borders and reconnect, because we'll have to have some sort of tool so that we can have assurance that it's only vaccinated people that we're letting in or letting out, because that's how we start to manage the risk. So we're beginning to build up the tools and the policies that allow us to do that. But again, everything rests on that very high rate of vaccination. I'm not in a position tonight to put a firm figure or a firm date on it. But I think if we, in the coming month or so, if we're able to push up to 90% or beyond, our ambition is that we do move forward with that new framework and with reconnection as soon as we can.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. I will shift the topic of discussion towards another thing because it's quite COVID, related. Anyhow, so when it comes to sustainability and reducing the emission of greenhouse gas and carbon footprints, what major changes are in the pipeline to overcome the global warming and the climate changes issue? Because we have seen in the past that how it has been alarming, So, yeah.
Well, look, this is a really, really important issue. In fact, I would say it's one of the most important issues that we face. Yeah. And I sometimes say that I think in 30 years' time, when my kids or grandkids look back, one of the questions that they'll ask me, they'll say, well, when you had the chance and you were in government, Dad or Grandpa, what did you do about climate change? Because that's the issue that's going to affect their lives in the future. Yes. And so I think we've got to prioritise it. Over the last week, the government has released what we call our emissions reduction plan, which is our whole of government piece of work, collecting up all of the policies that we intend to move forward with to reduce our emissions to net zero by 2050. And that's what we have to do if we want to limit climate change to 1.5 degrees. Because if you go up much above 1.5 degrees, you start to get some very, very serious impacts on the world. So that's across everything. It's across our energy, it's across our businesses, it's across agriculture. And in my area, it's about transport, which is about 20% of our emissions and around about 47% of our carbon dioxide emissions. So we've got a lot of work to do there. We're going to have to reduce the emissions that we make by planning our cities better, so that when we have new housing growth, we don't make people totally dependent on having to get into their cars to get to work, to get to school, to do the shopping and all that kind of thing. We're going to have to really build up much better public transport. So that's why we're investing in things like the City Rail link and light rail and other good public transport services. We're going to have to make sure that people have great walking and cycling options. You know, when I was a kid, most kids walked to school. They don't now because parents don't feel it's safe. We're going to have to fix that. And we're going to have to make sure that when we do get new cars into New Zealand, that they're much cleaner. Because up until now, New Zealand has had one of the dirtiest car fleets in the developed world, because we've had no standards on the vehicles that we bring in. And we've only had a very low rate of electric vehicles. And we've started to bring in policies that are really beginning to change that. And that's already working. So we've got a lot of work to do across the whole spectrum of policy to meet that challenge, to reduce our emissions, and to make sure that our kids and grandkids have got a decent world to grow up in.
Thank you very much. You have seen that the price of the fuel is on the rise, and that means the economy is restarting itself. So when the price goes up, obviously the fares goes up. How will you be able to tackle, being a Minister of Transport, that the fares doesn't go up and it stays within the reach of the people?
Is that the public transport fares?
Public transport, yes, sorry.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. Look, we're continuing to keep a very close eye on that one. You're right, we have had significant petrol price increases in recent times, mainly driven by international factors. We haven't had such, we've managed to keep a reasonable lid on the public transport prices. We've, in our recent, what we call our National Land Transport Fund, that's the big pot of money that every 3 years we allocate to councils to run public transport services. We've just announced that over the last couple of months, and we've increased the public transport budget by about 50% to make sure that we can keep offering good, relatively affordable services. And I'm very focused on trying to make sure they're as affordable as possible. And so this year, for example, I've worked with Mayor Phil Goff here in Auckland to say that we're going to pilot a new service called the Community Connect Card, which will go to our people who have a community services card. That's our lowest income households. And from next year, this will give them half price public transport in Auckland. And we're going to trial that here in Auckland. And if that works, look to spread that more widely across the country. So we've got some policies in place here to try and address the affordability in public transport. And I think that will really start to open it up to even more people. But the most important thing is that we get really good, effective and accessible services to people. We know that when we do that, more people are willing to leave the car at home and get on the bus or the train to make their journeys.
Yeah, that sounds like a plan, and we really wish you all the very best, because definitely we need a cleaner future for our grandchildren, as you have already mentioned. So I'm just going to hop on to the other part of your portfolio, that is work relations and safety. So how would you define workplace relations and safety, and how important is it for the employees and employers at work?
Well, look, it's a very important area, because if you think about it, we spend a very large percentage of our waking lives at work. A lot of people spend 40, 50, 60 hours in their work every week. And so that has a huge impact on people's lives, their economic welfare, their mental well-being, their sense of satisfaction and achievement in life. And so making sure that we have workplaces that are fair, in which people are able to have some ability to contribute, which are very safe. All of these things are very, very important. And so my job in this portfolio is to look after that set of issues. And so that covers things like making sure that we have fit-for-purpose laws to make sure that people are relatively safe at work. Unfortunately, New Zealand has quite a poor record compared to many other countries in this area. So we're looking to how we can improve our practice to keep people safe at work. It's about making sure that people are paid fairly, that we have adequate provisions for sick leave and annual leave, those sorts of issues. Then you hit a situation like COVID, and a whole lot of other issues come up. How, for example, do we deal with workplaces where people might have to take time off work to get tested? Should that person be able to do that on paid time? Should the employer be compensated for that? What about the issue of workplace vaccination? Should that be compulsory or not? All of these sorts of issues we get dealt with within this portfolio. So it's a really interesting one, and it's one that I very much enjoy. And for me, it comes down to three big things. I want us to have workplaces in New Zealand that are fair for everyone, for the employer, for the employee, workplaces that are safe. We should not have people being harmed at work, and too many people are, and workplaces that are productive, because I believe that if we have workers, employers, unions all working together, that's how we drive forward good productivity and a more prosperous country for everyone.
Thank you very much. While we're talking about place safety, are you feeling comfortable with the current records or stats of the workplace safety? Is your ministry thinking of introducing any new legislation or laws into the workplace safety?
No, I don't feel comfortable. I won't feel comfortable while anyone is harmed in New Zealand workplaces. And we currently, unfortunately, have about twice as many people per capita dying in New Zealand workplaces as Australia, and about 4 times as many as in the United Kingdom. And we've got to change that. And often we look at the headline figure, we look at how many people are killed in the workplace. And in New Zealand, most years, it might be about 50 or 60 people. But the rate of serious harm is much, much higher than that. We have thousands of people who are physically or mentally harmed at work every year, and that's just not good enough. We are making progress in a number of those areas, but we've just got to keep pushing it harder and harder. So we do have a very ambitious program underway in this area. I'm bringing in improvements to what we call our workplace health and safety representative system to make sure that we have empowered workers in the workplace who know what their health and safety rights are, who know how to speak up if there's an issue and try and constructively resolve issues. We're working on our regulatory framework. So we've just announced, for example, changes to the regulations around what we call plant and structures. And that's the area within workplace health and safety where most of the harm occurs. It's when people are driving vehicles, when they're maybe on a cherry picker, when they're operating machinery, that kind of thing. About 2/3 of the deaths and serious injuries occur in this area. And I've just announced a complete new set of rules in this area that we're currently consulting on. And we believe that will probably save 8, 9, 10 lives in New Zealand every year, for example, and many injuries as well. And we'll be moving on to other areas like dealing with hazardous substances. So we've got an ongoing process of reform. But the most important thing I say in health and safety is, as government, we can set the rules and framework, and we've got to make sure we get that right. But actually, we're not the ones who are on the factory floor or the shop floor. We've got to get workers and employers, unions, all working together to really not just treat health and safety like a tick box exercise, but to make it real every day at work, that it's just a normal part of work that you think health and safety and you don't accept any harm. And that's a cultural change that we've got to move towards as a country.
I totally agree with that. It's a cultural change because the mindset is a very fixed mindset of some people, and it needs to take time to overcome that, honestly, because, I've seen those cases, honestly. But definitely, if those things could change, it will be very helpful. Thank you very much for doing that for us. Talking about, so on the same thing, that is there any program to educate or for the awareness of the employers for providing equal opportunities to their Muslim staff, especially women?
Yeah, that's a very, very important area. That more falls into the portfolio of the Honourable Priyanka Radhakrishnan, who, of course, you know very well, who's been doing a lot of work in this space about how we work with employers in both the public sector and the private sector to make sure that we really are offering equitable opportunities, whether it's equal opportunities between men and women, between people from different faith or cultural backgrounds. The message we want to put out in New Zealand is that everyone gets treated fairly and everyone gets similar opportunities. to be able to contribute in the workplace. So she's been leading a huge amount of work there. She's sort of mainly focused in the first instance on what are the opportunities that we can provide in the public sector, because we can, in the first instance, more directly influence that. And we kind of feel that as government, we should be setting the standard and leading the way. So she's got some great programs underway there, for example, through the Ministry of Ethnic Communities, for example, around what's called a cadetship program, where we've set up specific provision in some public service agencies to be making sure that we are bringing in people from diverse backgrounds into graduate roles within the public service and giving people opportunities, and then letting them move into more senior roles and really starting to seed things off from there. But we're also very, very keen to start moving that out into the private sector, to be making sure that we are drawing on the incredible skills that we have across all of our communities. Now, one of the things that I'm very hot on is I really think that one of the biggest strengths that New Zealand has as we stand here in 2021 is the diversity that we have means that we have a whole range of different skill sets, a whole range of different mindsets, a whole range of different cultural knowledges. And if we draw upon those as a country, that is going to be incredibly valuable for us. It's the right thing to do for people, but it will power our country ahead in terms of our international connections, our ability to problem solve and find new opportunities. So I'm very, very keen that we continue to find ways of giving everyone opportunities.
You have rightly highlighted about Priyanka Radhakrishnan and her ministry initiatives. I can tell you that I may be a beneficiary of that initiative. My wife have recently applied for a scholarship for leadership, ethnic women leadership qualities and all that. So she's looking to. She was submitting an application and asked me to help her on that. So that's obviously there is initiatives which we always welcome. There are a few questions which we will take later from the audience, and the first question I'll definitely take from Mr. Rizwan now. He's saying, Mr. Wood is Minister of 2 key portfolios and is having a role in Beehive, very active in his constituency as well. How do you manage the work-life balance, especially during the COVID times?
Well, look, during COVID times, I'm at home all the time, and I do everything on Zoom or on online video like this. So that's been one of the little upsides of COVID. I have seen more of my wife and kids because I'm actually home for meal times now, when usually I'm not. Look, it's life in politics, particularly in a minister's role, does mean that you do. The one downside is you do end up losing some of that family time, and that does go with the territory, unfortunately. But we do try and carve off bits of time, particularly in the school holidays, for example, to make sure that we really do prioritise having some quality time together as a family. And I do think that's really, really important. Politics can be tough on families, and the most important thing is finding some time. But I'll take my hat off here. It also relies on having very understanding partners as well, who, to be quite honest, take a lot of the slack that you're unable to do as a parent and as a partner. And I'm very lucky in that respect too.
That's good. That's good. That's the case with every one of us, I guess, because we are spending a lot of time at home and we get to see more of different aspects of our partners, I would say. that can be a big challenge as well for some people.
No, I'll tell you the one other thing that's helped me with work-life balance and mental health, particularly during the lockdown, is it was hard to begin with, but I get up a bit early every morning and I go out and I have a nice walk early in the morning, get some exercise, some fresh air, clear my head, and I feel much better after that.
Yeah, good. We will take another question from the our viewers. Has government got any plan like airline industry to keep non-vaccinated people away from the work?
Away from the front-facing work.
Front-facing work. Yeah.
Yes. Look, this is one of the areas that we are working on at the moment, and obviously it's an issue of quite a lot of interest to people as we move into the next phase and as we get high rates of vaccination. So what's being referred to here is that Air New Zealand has recently announced that it's going to move forward with a policy to have some of its work only done by vaccinated workers, not all of its work. What they've done is they've done what's called a health and safety risk assessment. They've looked at different parts of their workforce. They've assessed the risk, and they're determining that in some of those areas it's probably appropriate that it can only be done by vaccinated people. And other companies are beginning to go through that. And that's the current legal health and safety framework that we have in place at the moment. What the government has also done in some very sort of sensitive roles, like our border workforce and our health workforce and our teachers, we have now put out what's called a public health order, where we are requiring that people who are doing that work are also vaccinated, because we believe that there's a higher risk in those areas if one of those workers was to have COVID, that they could potentially transmit it to many people. So that's the tool we've used, the order. We do have a range of other workplaces who are now saying, well, what's the rule for us? And at the moment, for those workplaces, it's the same as Air New Zealand. They can go through the same process. They can do a health and safety assessment, consult with their workers, and if the risk is high enough, they can potentially require that work is only done by vaccinated workers. What we are having a look at the moment is whether we as government can provide some more certainty to employers and employees in that area, because some of them are a bit worried that if they went down that track, would they end up in court? Would they have months of uncertainty? What will their customers' expectations will be? So we have had representations from a number of employer groups to say to us as government, can you effectively set the bar for us about where that requirement should come in? So that's something we're looking at the moment. It's quite a complicated area because it goes to the rights that an employee has around medical treatment versus the rights that a customer might feel they have to be safe coming into a shop, the rights that a fellow worker might feel. Do they want to work next to someone who's not vaccinated? So it's a very complicated legal area, and we're working through that at the moment.
Thank you very much. And Frasat has actually put up another question, and that is how government department are going to address the anti-vaccination and non-vaccinated workforce. Yes.
Look, in government departments, as I say, for the ones where we feel that there is the highest risk, and that's particularly been in our border workforces, all of our health workforce now, and all of our teachers, we have now mandated that those workers do need to be vaccinated. So, for example, in my area, we did that at our airports and our maritime port workers, and that came in from the end of September. And what we actually found when we put that mandate in is that by the end of that period, about 97, 98% of people did get the vaccination. So it was only a very small percent who didn't. And unfortunately, some of those people will have to find other work because they have not met that requirement. So that rule is a very strong one. But we give it a little bit of time to really encourage and persuade people to first try and get the vaccination. We don't want to just kick people out of their jobs at the drop of a hat. We want to give them the chance to get the vaccination. And then we are looking at what is appropriate across other parts of the workforce as well through that process that I just described. In terms of the anti-vaccination, what we find is that the people who are genuinely hardline anti-vaccination, it's actually a very, very small group. And some of these people have got, they've really been the victims of misinformation. They've really gone down the conspiracy rabbit hole on YouTube and that kind of thing. And for some of those people, it can be very hard to get through to them. But that's, I don't know, maybe that's 2 or 3%. It's a very small group.
Very small.
We've then got another group, maybe it's 5 or 6% of people who are just a bit hesitant. They're a bit worried. Maybe they're a bit scared of needles. Maybe they've had a bad experience previously with the health system. Maybe they just need a bit more information. And with those people, we just want to take the gentle approach, encourage them, support them, educate them. And that's where, to be quite honest with you, it's more effective if it comes from their friends, their family, or community leaders than if it comes from politicians. So that's one of the things we're really, really encouraging, is just through our community networks to be spreading the word about how important the vaccination is and how safe it is. And through events like Super Saturday, we had lots of people there who had been hesitant for weeks, but they'd had someone talk to them and they went forward and got the job. So we'll just keep educating people in that way.
Yeah, thank you very much for giving a very clear message to all the people who would just like another push from you or anyone else. Reassurance.
But look, here's the final push. If you want the great New Zealand summer where we can meet each other, we can come together for community events, people can go on holidays, get vaccinated. That's what we've got to do.
A good Christmas time, definitely. All right. My next question would be that very interesting question, that when can we expect to see a train line service connecting North Shore in Auckland to the central or south Auckland?
Oh, great question. Well, look, today we had a very exciting, on the train front, a very exciting moment. It's up on my Facebook page if anyone wants to have a look. We're currently building the City Rail link underneath central Auckland, and the huge big tunnel machine just broke through into one of the new stations, and it's a very dramatic bit of video footage. So that's exciting. That'll really improve the train services in Auckland. We've got a lot of work happening on the southern line. We're building a third line there. We're electrifying the train service down to Pukekohe as well. So lots of work happening to improve public transport. But what about the North Shore? We've got the great success of the North Shore Busway. The last Labour government built that last time we were in, and that now carries more than half of the people who come across the Harbour Bridge. So people on the North Shore have really flocked to good public transport. But we know that with all of the growth on the North Shore, that busway will run out of capacity in the coming decade or so. So we are going to have to give much greater capacity there. We're currently looking at what we need to do in terms of a second harbour crossing, and that work is happening at the moment. We've allocated money for the planning of that and for initial property acquisition. It could be a bridge, it could be a tunnel. We're just working through the best options there. And that crossing will be a public transport centred crossing, and it will need to be a higher capacity form of public transport, which either means some form of light rail, light metro, heavy rail. The thinking at the moment is probably that a light rail or light metro system is the best. That can get you very similar capacities as the heavy rail system, but it's not as costly, and the infrastructure is not as heavy that you need to build. So that work is underway, and I do believe that we need to get a rail service of some kind up to the North Shore, and probably by about the 2030s is when we're looking at it at the moment.
Thank you very much. And just a general question. Thank you to Aisha as asked the related question to your ministry. Just a general question. The business in general are not happy because of the COVID lockdowns and all that. How do you see your government supporting the small and medium business post this lockdown?
Look, it's been a really tough year, particularly here in Auckland. If you've been in small business in most sectors, things were looking really positive up until August. Actually,
Yes.
we were getting really strong economic growth. Businesses were doing well. Unemployment was down at record levels. So the economic plan that we rolled out after 2020 was really working, and a lot of businesses were feeling quite good and confident. Obviously, that's taken a real knock because of COVID Delta and the need to have these lockdowns over the last couple of months, and it's been very, very tough for some people. And I just caught up with one of a local hospitality business in my electorate the other day who talked through just, they've kept their employees on, but boy, they're really on the edge. So we are going to have to really move into a period where we focus on economic recovery. But I think the good news here is that we showed that we could do it last time, that with the right government policies, we can really help businesses move forward. So we have continued to push the money through in the wage subsidy, the resurgence payments. That's been about giving businesses just enough cash flow to keep going, to keep paying the bills, to keep people employed. But the other important thing I'll say about those policies, and we've pushed out about $15 billion through the wage subsidy now. What's important for businesses about those is not only is it helping them to keep their employees employed, but it's keeping money in the pockets of the employees so that when we do get out of lockdown, those people are able to get out there and spend in their local communities. And that's the key role that government can play in a difficult economic period like this, is we can provide the stimulus that keeps the economy moving forward. So the wage subsidy, the investment that we've made into infrastructure gets money flowing through the economy. This is one that I know a lot of small businesses don't always like when I talk about it to begin with, but us putting the minimum wage up, that's put money into the pockets of low-income people. They go and spend it. They spend every single dollar that they have in the businesses in their communities. So that's been our policy. It's getting the economy moving when we get out of these lockdown periods, and we will continue with those policies. And we'll keep looking at what we can do. We keep an open mind about what additional supports and policies we can have to assist people to get through. But I'll come back to where we started. Really, the number one thing is we want to get out of the lockdowns. If we get the vaccination rates up, that is the best thing we can do for small business, because that'll enable you to open your doors and get back to your customers.
Yeah, thank you very much. Next question I'm just going to take from our audience. That is, some of the health and safety issues like workplace injury, fire hazards are very obvious to spot. However, there are some issues like racism, bullying, stereotyping are very subtle and extremely hard to uncover in workplaces. Do you think that we need to deal it as workplace safety issues, especially of mental health? How are these being addressed?
It's an excellent question, and it's a real priority for us. The answer is yes, yes, yes. These sorts of behaviours and activities in workplaces, bullying, harassment, it might be sexual harassment, it might be racial discrimination, cause real harm to people. And we believe a huge amount of the harm in workplaces is actually caused by people having diminished mental well-being as a result of these sorts of things happening in the workplaces. But the person is right. They're much more difficult and subtle to spot. If someone falls off a ladder, you can see what's happened, and you can put in a new procedure to stop that, minimize the risk of that happening again. Much, much more difficult if perhaps over a period of 6 months there's been a subtle campaign of bullying or undermining someone or racist comments. Someone can just deny that. How do you prove it? Yeah. So these things are much more challenging to work through, but we believe they're enormously important. So WorkSafe, who is the organisation that we have, who is New Zealand's health and safety regulator, is now has a proper unit which is focused around mentally healthy work, and their job is to be dealing with this area, to be working with employers, employees, and unions to get good practices in place, to be giving people the tools to be able to spot problems and to solve problems. We've done things like, for example, we set up what's called an early resolution service, where, for example, if someone's experiencing a problem like this in the workplace, instead of having to wait till it gets to a high level and then having a personal grievance, they can pick up the phone to, this isn't to WorkSafe, to Employment New Zealand. They can raise the problem, and through a phone-based service, our team will try and sort it out with the employee and the employer and see if we can resolve it at that stage. And if not, refer it on to a higher level. So we're trying to put in place the interventions and support that begin to deal with these issues. But again, it comes back to a bit of a cultural issue, as we talked about before. We've got to get it into people's heads that mental harm can be as serious as physical harm in the workplace, and we need to take it as seriously in terms of the practices that we have. And so I just send out the very clear message to people that if you are experiencing those issues, then do raise it. Talk to someone you trust at work, talk to your employer. If you don't feel comfortable doing that, talk to your union rep, talk to your health and safety rep, phone up WorkSafe or phone up Employment New Zealand, get some advice and some support.
Yeah, thank you very much, Michael, and thank you to Khazima for asking such a good question. The last question from my side, and thank you very much for being short and crisp. You have answered all the difficult questions as well. So my last question, as you spoke in the previous question that about the government spending on infrastructure to stimulus the economy, what are the few projects your ministry is thinking to initiate in next 2 years?
Yes, well, we have a very big program underway. We have what's called the New Zealand Upgrade Program, which is nearly a $9 billion program of transport investment all across the country. Some of those projects are underway, but some of them haven't started yet and will be getting underway shortly. For example, we're building a new rail link between Whangarei and Port Marsden, which is the very major Northport, people will know it as, so that we get rail services out there to stimulate the economy, to get more freight goods onto rail instead of being on the roads. We've got that investment I talked about before into electrifying the rail line between Papakura and Pukekohe to get more frequent and reliable trains down to Pukekohe. We've got investment going into a new safe piece of motorway infrastructure on the Kapiti coast, the Otaki to Levin motorway project there that we're investing in as well, and many, many others around the country. But probably the one that people are most familiar with and many people might be interested in is our proposed investment in light rail in Auckland. And this is about building up an integrated public transport network in Auckland that's clean, reliable, and connects right across the city. And so we're moving forward with that. We'll have further announcements coming up probably by about the end of next month around how we intend to take that service forward to give people right across central Auckland, Mount Roskill, Onehunga, Mangere access to fantastic public transport. So billions of dollars of investment going in there, and all about delivering better transport outcomes for New Zealanders.
Thank you very much. That sounds really exciting for us. Michael, I would just like to say thank you to you because you have, given us an insight into all your portfolios and what's going to happen and what are the new projects that we would look forward to. I would just like to request if there is any last message that you would like to give us to, to our viewers related to vaccination or anything else.
Well, look, we've got one job as MPs at the moment, and that is to encourage everyone to get vaccinated. And so I know we'll sound like a bit of a stuck record there, but that's what I would say. Firstly, I would thank everyone who's got their 2 vaccinations done so far. Good on you. You're making a positive difference to the health of your loved ones and of our community. So thank you for that. But if you've already done that, your job's not finished yet. Please now go and encourage and support the other people in your family, people in your social network, people in your workplaces, and encourage them to get vaccinated as well, because it's those people that we've got to reach out now to if we want to get above 90% to keep people safe and to get our country opening up again and getting back to all of the things that we love and want to get back to have a great Kiwi summer. So please do take that message forward. And finally, just a big thank you to everyone. I'm here in Auckland with many of you. Now, it's been 9 weeks now at level 3 and 4. It has been difficult going for many people. There's been mental strain. Some people are worried about their jobs or their businesses. I know it's really tough. So let's just remember we're doing this for each other. We're continuing to save lives. Most other countries are still losing a lot of people to COVID every week, and we're not. And that's the work that we're doing together.
Yes.
So thank you for your patience and your sacrifices. Let's get this vaccination up as higher than anywhere in the world. And I think we can have a much better 2022 if we do that. So thank you all.
I agree. Thank you very much, Michael. And we really appreciate you giving us time and sending out the strong message and answering comprehensively to our questions. And I believe it's very important being a responsible citizen of this country. It is our responsibility to go out, educate other people who are on the borderline thinking of getting vaccinated or not. And that's what PANZ have done yesterday. We actually managed to get 200 people vaccinated.
Fantastic. That is an outstanding outcome.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Michael. And it's great to have you every time. And just before we finish our program today, I'd let you know, Aisha, Michael is the first one where we started this program. So when we started this program, it was 20-minute live with PANZ or something. And Michael was the first person who has actually joined us in this program, and that's where we have started all this Vice of PANZ, and it came with the few different names, Power Hour and all that. So Michael has been a very good supporter to Pakistan Association of New Zealand, and he always extends his support to ethnic communities, Pakistani communities, and he's always available, approachable, and I really appreciate his effort and support and time he spends with us.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for that, Michael. Yep.
जी बिल्कुल ठीक हो गया, और बड़ा मजा आया मुझे तो प्रोग्राम करके माइकल के साथ. जैसे मैंने पहले बोला कि माइकल के साथ काम करने का, प्रोग्राम करने का बहुत मजा आता है. कभी कभी मुझे लगता है कि ये हम में से ही हैं, मतलब ये कोई पाकिस्तानी इंडियन है. He does not he's not a Kiwi, he's a Pakistani or Indian among us. So he's so humble and he's so welcoming and all that. अच्छा, बड़ी अच्छी कल की बात ये थी कि 200 जो लोगों ने वैक्सीनेशन लगवाई, उसमें से बहुत सारे बच्चों ने भी कल वैक्सीनेशन लगवाई है. और खुशी इस चीज की थी कि बच्चे आ रहे थे, वैक्सीनेशन लगवा रहे थे और जाते हुए थैंक यू कह के जा रहे थे. कल एक खातून आई जो कि मेरा ख्याल है एज होगी उनकी 50 इयर्स के करीब होगी, और एथनिसिटी उनकी मेरा ख्याल है कि सामोन या टोंगन थी, वो पैसिफिका थी. एंड शी वाज सो हैप्पी that we have arranged so much in Otahuhu and we are looking after the Otahuhu community. And she was all very thankful एंड उन्होंने मेरे साथ हाथ मिलाया मुझे, मतलब ऑलमोस्ट शी वांटेड टू हग मी एंड आई सेड सॉरी आई कांट हग यू बट थैंक यू वेरी मच, एंड शी वाज वेरी हैप्पी यस्टरडे। तो आयशा, मेरा ख्याल है कि इसके साथ ही हम अपने प्रोग्राम का अख्ताम करें।
हाँ
बहुत
जी।
सारे लोगों ने आज हमें देखा। हमारा मकसद वॉइस ऑफ पांस का ये है कि हम कम्युनिटीज को कनेक्ट करें टू द पीपल हु हैज द पावर टू चेंज, कि जहां पे कुछ चीजें गलत हो रही हैं, कुछ चीजें मुश्किल में हैं। जैसे इस वक्त में हमारी जो कम्युनिटी है उनके 2-3 प्रॉब्लम्स हैं। नंबर 1 प्रॉब्लम ये है कि हमारे बॉर्डर्स बंद हैं, जिसकी वजह से हम पाकिस्तान नहीं जा सकते, हमारे पेरेंट्स यहाँ नहीं आ सकते। 2-2 साल हो गए हमें अपने पेरेंट्स और फैमिलीज के साथ मिले हुए। उसके बाद दूसरा बड़ा मसला ये है कि बिजनेसेस जो हैं वो बहुत ज्यादा इस वक्त ट्रबल में हैं। हमारे बहुत सारे लोग हैं जो स्मॉल एंड मीडियम बिजनेसेस करते हैं, उसका प्रॉब्लम है उनको। उसके बाद जो तीसरा प्रॉब्लम है, जो स्टूडेंट्स के वीजास के इश्यूज थे, उसके बाद स्टैंडर्ड माइग्रेंट्स के इश्यूज हैं। वी वांटेड टू हाईलाइट इट टू द माइकल वुड, एंड माइकल वुड एक्चुअली आई नो दैट ही विल टेक दीज थिंग्स विद हिम, एंड जो अपनी गवर्नमेंट को जो है वो जाके ब्रीफ भी करेंगे। तो आयशा, मेरा ख्याल है आपके साथ इजाजत ली जाए लोगों से।
हाँ जी, मैं जाते जाते बस अपने जो हमारे कल के जो हमारे वो थे स्पॉन्सर्स, उनको थैंक यू कर दूं। और लाइफ लाइन था हमारे साथ, व्हीकल डायरेक्ट, व्हीकल हायर, प्री इवेंट हायर, व्हीकल डायरेक्ट, और जो चैरिटेबल ट्रस्ट था, इनकी मदद से कल जो है हमने वो इवेंट जो है अरेंज करवाया और वैक्सीनेशन जो है हमारी अरेंज हुई।
बिल्कुल।
सुपर
और ये वो
सैटरडे।
लोग हैं जो साइलेंट हीरोज हैं। देखिए, आप अपनी जेब
हाँ
से हजारों डॉलर निकाल के देना। अब कल का जो अगर आप देखें इवेंट जो है itself, पाकिस्तान एसोसिएशन हैव स्पेंट ऑलमोस्ट $5,000 बिकॉज देयर इज अ ग्रोसरी पैक्स, 200 ग्रोसरी पैक्स हमने दिए हैं। उसके अलावा कॉफी थी, लंच था, फिर गिफ्ट हैम्पर्स वगैरह भी थे। तो दिस इज ऑल बीन स्पॉन्सर्ड बाय दीज पीपल। प्री इवेंट हायर, व्हीकल डायरेक्ट बहुत बड़ा
हाँ
स्पॉन्सर
जी।
था कल। मियां वसीम जो है वो मुबारकबाद के मुस्तहक हैं। अब देखें, किसी को भी पता नहीं होगा कि ये सारा का सारा कल 200 लोगों ने जो वैक्सीनेशन लगवाई है, देयर वाज अ टीम बिहाइंड इट। ऑब्वियसली वॉलंटियर्स की टीम भी थी और फिर स्पॉन्सर्स की टीम भी थी।
हाँ
लाइफलाइन
जी।
मेडिकल सेंटर जो है, जो कि पाकिस्तानी डॉक्टर इमरान का है, और उन्होंने ही हैज एक्चुअली अलाउड अस टू ब्रिंग द कम्युनिटीज टू गेट वैक्सीनेटेड। 5 से 10 मिनट लग रहे थे, वैक्सीनेशन हो रही थी, एंड देन यू मूव ऑन। तो ये सारी के सारे वो लोग हैं जो कि कम्युनिटीज के लिए काम करते हैं। दो हम लोग बिल्कुल रिगार्ड, समटाइम हमें नहीं याद रहता कि कौन लोग हैं जिन्होंने हमारे लिए इतनी एफर्ट्स किए। एंड द अदर थिंग इन द एंड व्हिच इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, द सॉफ्ट इमेज ऑफ पाकिस्तानी कम्युनिटी इन न्यूजीलैंड, वो भी हाईलाइट हुआ है। जैसे अभी अब माइकल वुड जो मिनिस्टर हैं, उन्होंने भी इसको रिकॉग्नाइज किया, एथनिक कम्युनिटीज वाले भी रिकॉग्नाइज कर रहे हैं। गवर्नमेंट ने भी बहुत सारी तस्वीर जो है वो अपनी वेबसाइट के ऊपर पाकिस्तान एसोसिएशन ऑफ न्यूजीलैंड की डाली है। तो दीज आर द फ्यू थिंग्स व्हिच वी हैव अचीव्ड यस्टरडे।
हाँ जी, डेफिनेटली अ बिग थैंक यू टू ऑल आवर स्पॉन्सर्स और हमारे वॉलंटियर्स जो 1-2 दिन पहले जाके वहां तैयारियां शुरू कर देते हैं। मतलब कि उनके अपने भी घर हैं, उनकी अपनी भी जॉब्स है, लेकिन वो फिर भी टाइम निकाल के हमारे लिए सारा कुछ करते हैं। तो अ बिग थैंक यू टू ऑल द स्पॉन्सर्स एंड टू ऑल द वॉलंटियर्स, एंड होपफुली वी आर आउट ऑफ इट वेरी सून। कल अनाउंसमेंट हो
जी,
रही है, सो वी
इंशाल्लाह।
विल बी लुकिंग फॉरवर्ड टू दैट कि हम इस सिचुएशन में से बाहर निकले, क्योंकि definitely it is damaging the mental health well-being of many people, so we really want
एग्री,
to get out of
एग्री।
it. और जितना हमारा जो है वो वैक्सीनेशन रेट ऊपर जाएगा, उतना ही जल्दी हम इससे बाहर निकलेंगे। तो
बेशक।
उम्मीद करती हूँ कि आप सब जो है वो कल अपने अपने काम पे जाएंगे और अच्छे से जो है वो पूरी सेफ्टी के साथ अपना काम करें, क्योंकि हम देख रहे हैं कि काफी केसेस जो है वो अनलिंक्ड हैं। तो प्लीज टेक केयर ऑफ योरसेल्फ, गेट
बिल्कुल
वैक्सीनेटेड,
ऐसा ही
और
है।
मेरी तरफ से अल्लाह
मेरी तरफ से
हाफिज।
भी जी अल्लाह हाफिज। और जैसे आयशा ने जाते जाते कहा कि लुक आफ्टर योरसेल्फ, स्टे हेल्दी, स्टे सेफ, एंड प्रोटेक्ट योरसेल्फ एंड प्रोटेक्ट योर नेबर्स एंड प्रोटेक्ट योर कम्युनिटी। अपना ख्याल रखिएगा। इसके साथ ही पाकिस्तान जिंदाबाद। अस्सलाम वालेकुम।
अल्लाह हाफिज।